We are officially live. It'll take a couple of seconds for it to go through, but we're live. So, hello, Christopher. How are you doing? How is your day?
Hello. My day's going well. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. I am good. I'm super excited to. I'm super excited to get into the ins and outs of Ranked 2.0. I can't lie. Obviously, Christopher, I know who you are, but for those who are watching, can you please give a little introduction of what you do for Siege?
Sure. I'm the live content director on Siege. I work very closely with Joshua Mills. Joshua handles the gameplay, so everything that happens within the match. And then when you go from one match to the next, you're kind of in my world. So handling the live content, everything that you'll experience, whether it's the economy or the progression, the matchmaking, cross progression, etc., all that kind of stuff kind of falls under me.
Awesome. That is good to know. And for those who haven't been here before, I'm Titanium Rolo. I'm a Siege content creator. I stream, I make videos, and yeah, I love Siege. Basically, that's my introduction.
Love it.
So I guess a good place to start this conversation as Rank 2.0, I appreciate it has it's like some people absolutely love it, some people aren't the biggest fan of it. So I guess for you guys, I imagine it was a hard decision to go from ranked 1.0 to 2.0. Like it wasn't a decision I assumed that was like taken lightly, and there was a lot of work put into it. So with that in mind, have you seen an increase in the numbers of players who play ranked and the number of games played a season?
Yeah, so you're right. So the ranked playlist is a very important playlist in Siege. It's by far our most important playlist. And yes, we've seen a major increase in terms of the players who are playing ranked. So in Ranked 2.0 today, we have 45% of our players that play ranked every season. Compare that to Ranked 1.0, it was only 35%. So that's almost a third increase. Not only that, so yes, more players are playing ranked, but also they're playing way more than they used to. Used to have placement matches in ranked 1.0, and there would be a very large population of our that would come in every season, play their placement matches, get whatever position they ended up, and then they would leave and likely come back next season. We would hope. But now we see them playing longer. They stick within ranked longer. It takes them longer to get to, say, gold, for example. They on average takes about 50 matches for a median gold to reach that rank. And then that bleeds into other playlists as well. So that means more people in quick match, more people in standard. As people are playing longer per season, then all playlists benefit from that, but especially ranked.
Okay, awesome. And I guess I definitely am one of those players. I can't lie. In ranked 1.0, I used to play my 10 placements, place in diamond, and then not play again. It was too stressful.
Yeah, but also you risk dropping, right? Like that's how it happened, right? So you'd place, you'd say in your case you get diamond, and then maybe you'd want to get to champion, but maybe you just have an off season and drop from there. So it wasn't always the best feeling, especially for a lot of players that were positioning. Say they ended up in gold, and then they would just drop to bronze for the rest of the season, and that's not a very welcoming experience, and it wasn't an enjoyable experience for a lot of our population.
Okay, sure. And yeah, I fully appreciate it as well because I guess by playing your placements, you obviously couldn't place champ. So when I hit diamond, I was like, well, the next thing is champ, and I I wasn't a champ, so I was like, yeah, I'm done. So that makes sense. So I think one of the most pressing questions I've had in the comments when I've asked for questions for this is why was the decision made to have the skill side of the MMR hidden?
So skill is just a like the MMR, the old elo that we would display in ranked 1.0 was a matchmaking value that you would be matchmade on. But with rank 2.0, the reason why we did want to separate the rank and the MMR itself is that we knew we could do a lot with matchmaking in terms of improvements. And I'd love to talk about that today. Um, just that number is not the whole story. And I think that one thing I like to talk about during this time is what we're going to be doing as well in the future and how we want to improve that. But by separating rank and a skill, it had two benefits. One is that we get to work on the actual matchmaking and then try to improve it and try to do that in a way that allowed for the best quality of matches which the number itself did not necessarily tell you the whole story. And the other one was adding that sense of progression. So instead of everybody, doing their 10 placements and then just kind of ending up where they ended up in the community, allowing people to kind of start at the, say, Copper 5 and work their way up to where they belong in the community.
Okay, so I assume from this conversation that the hidden MMR will that remain hidden in the future?
We currently don't have plans to bring back the MMR value as is, that skill value. But one thing that is true in rank 2.0 is that once the rank and the skill get on top of each other, so like your rank has now kind of caught up with your skill, you start to see that you get the same amount of points for a victory as a loss. And so you kind of bounce in between there. So if I'm getting, say, plus 20 for a win and minus 20 for a loss, like you've converged is what we call it. That's your conversions, where your rank and your skill have kind of met each other. So there's probably options and opportunities for us to try to make that a lot better, and where you're going to converge, or how far away from conversion you are, or where do we think you're going to end up. But just that number itself, it's not the whole story, because that number is constantly evolving, like that skill value. If you're losing, it's dropping, and ultimately it's meaning that you can't go as far within the ranked ladder as you maybe previously could before that loss. And as you're winning, it also goes about. So maybe there's something we can do with the idea of conversions, kind of showing you a little bit about, moving forward or moving ahead and where your potential ends up, or dropping downwards if you're going on a losing streak. So we think more about it as, kind of bringing that to the forefront rather than just, bringing back the number.
Okay. So I guess with that in mind, how can players know that they're improving with their rank? If they can't see their skill level physically, how can they tell if they're improving from season to season?
So ultimately, getting further in the ranks is the best way to do that. Another great way to do that is that if you notice when that moment happens where you're kind of evening out between a win and a loss, that's ultimately where your skill is. So if, say, that happened to you on gold 3 on one season, then next season it's happening on gold 1. Those matches that you had done from Copper 5 up to gold 1, and that the wins, I would imagine that pushed you from, say, gold 3 to gold 1, were the reason why your skill started to pull away and pull out into the upper ranks. So if you start to see that your rank points are evening out at gold 3, and then next season it's gold 1, that means that your skill has improved.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. So yeah, that is definitely a way, I guess, thinking about it, that people can see that their skill has definitely improved. And the same as if their elo drop off is earlier, then they've obviously gotten worse in theory.
Yes.
So I also know that one of the biggest questions I think I get in like nearly every video that I make is, will there be a ranked 3.0, or are there any plans for that in the future?
Yes, we're not currently looking at it as a ranked 3.0. Instead, we're just looking at how can we improve from one season to the next. I mentioned in the Siege Intel videos, like one of the improvements we've done so far is, adding the headgears this year, and both Year 9 Season 1 and Year 9 Season 2, there's ranked headgears that you can get on when you reach Gold 1. These are the little improvements that we're going to be doing, and we have more improvements coming in Season 3, Season 4, and even into Year 10, where we're just going to be continuously improving the ranked playlist. And we see it more as like, how do we continue to improve it? How do we get it better? Does it mean UX improvements? Does it mean matchmaking improvements? But we're not kind of holding on to a bunch of fixes and then kind of saying, hey, this is ranked 3.0. Instead, we just like to naturally involve it and try to make it as best it can be.
Okay, so I guess following on from where you said about like the headgears that come, I believe that it's gold 1 this
Gold
season,
1, yeah.
and I think assume it's gold 1 next season.
It will be, yeah.
Is it always going to be gold 1, or will that change over time?
For now, we're leaving at gold 1, and actually, this could be a good time. I know, Rolo, we talked about displaying the hidden MMR curve, so we're happy to show that today. So in our designer notes, we shared the rank distribution. Now, the rank distribution is where people ended up as, which rank they ended up getting to. But today, we're showing the hidden MMR distribution.
So I will bring that
And
graph up now.
yeah, thank you. So I think like one of the key parts is there's a lot of players that have the skill of Gold 1 that are not necessarily reaching Gold 1 just because they're playing their X amount of matches and they're saying, hey, I'm playing through Copper, I'm playing through Bronze, and this is as far I'm going to go. But they could get to Gold 1 because their hidden MMR is there. And again, the reason why they are there is because we no longer reset skill. Previously in Ranked 1.0, we were doing what we called soft resets. Soft resets meant that we were actually bringing the top end of the community into the center of the bell curve and the bottom of the community into the, we didn't bring into the exact center. It was basically there was an algorithm which brought people closer into the center from the top into the bottom. And then what would happen is that the whole community would kind of be shuffled. So champs now all of a sudden are sitting in plat with their actual skill value that was shown, and they're playing plats because that's how the matchmaking was working, and then they would just slowly go back to champs. That's why a lot of players would say, "Oh, I'm going to wait the first few weeks of a new season in Ranked 1.0 because they did that shuffle made it the matchmaking really kind of wonky." Some people enjoyed it, some didn't as much. But what you can see now with that hidden MMR curve is that it's more of a bell curve than say our rank distribution is. And we do have a cap on on how far you can drop. We don't let you drop too far, or else you just end up in really it's tough for you to find a match in matchmaking. So we don't let you fall too far, but we do get a lot more granular into the top end. So we let the diamonds and the champions and stuff start to get into the smaller numbers. And I did see a question about like why is there more champions than in the diamonds? But keep in mind that champions don't have an end cap. So there's an entry point where now like you've passed the threshold and now you're in champion, but you don't get into champion 2 or champion 3, for example. Like there's no divisions in champion, whereas there are divisions in diamonds.
Sure, and I think I saw a graph that you guys shared on the Siege Intels posts that you've been doing, and I think it was like 0. 0.8 was in champ, but then if you combined all of the diamond divisions, it was higher than 0. 0.8. So if
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
so
2% or something. Yeah.
so it definitely does like fall off. And I guess when Ranked 2.0 first came out, there was a huge influx in champion players. But then I know
There
that
was, yeah.
after 1 or 2 seasons, that was altered. So have you found that it is now like decreased? Is it similar to the amount of people who were champ in 1.0, or is it slightly higher in 2.0?
It's like so essentially there was a new system. It's a new system that we launched in year 7 season 4, and we tried our best to balance it. But there's nothing like putting it live. So as soon as we put it live, you have millions of players all playing against each other, and as many simulations as you want to make ahead of time. There's nothing like putting it live. So when we did put it live, we ended up with way more champions than we felt comfortable with. In Ranked 1.0, we were pretty steady at a 0.2% of champions. When we went live at year 7 season 4 with Ranked 2.0, that we had almost 2% of champions on our first and second season. So both year 7 season 4 and year 8 season 1, there were many more champions. Which you still see today, like people got their background cards and so on, so they still show off their solar raid, champions. But now today, the last 3 seasons, it's been consistent, 0.8% of players who reach champion. We're somewhat happy with that number of getting into, you're well into that top 1%. But 0.2% was we weren't ready to go quite as far as Ranked 1.0 was. But 0.8% we've been pretty happy with that number lately.
Okay, that's awesome. And I know that you touched on during this conversation about this topic that in Ranked 1.0 that it was like reset or soft reset. So then it was
Yeah.
you had champs in like plat, for example. So with that in mind, will placement games ever return, or are they gone for good?
I think placements, they're gone for good for the moment. The reason why is because they're just not a real accurate view of where skill is. Say for example, I come back to the game, I play 10 matches and say, hey, I achieved that, and then that's all you did. Now today you have to play many more matches to get to that rank and to constantly hold up that rank. So say for example, you make it to gold on one season. If you want to get to the gold the next season, you once again have to play the matches to get to gold, which means you have to maintain that position. And you have to do that season after season, truly saying that you are gold. And the community changes. If you think about year 9, season 1, the community versus year 8, season 1, it's 1 year of difference, but the community is much different. Maybe the meta has changed. So, say ACOGs have come back. So how do you fare against, the new shields and the ACOGs like in year 9, season 1? So there is meaning to each season and how far you get into each rank, because it does kind of verify your skill, and much more so than 10 matches does.
Okay, and so I guess in regards to going back to the champs and there being 0.8% of players are champs, I know that for some people, like they feel that ranked has lost its competitive side. Are there any plans for the future to bring in either like an extra rank for like the top 500 people on each platform, or something further for the people who really do want to play the competitive side? I appreciate that Siege Cup is something that's coming in the future, but is there anything for ranked as well?
So we're not announcing anything today, but we are looking at what we can do for the top of the ladder. Like, we see an appetite from players that want something more. And in that we just feel that those players that have made it to champ and they just have that appetite for, like, I can go further. A lot of our pros would fall into that bucket, right? They getting to champion is not as difficult for them as it is for some other players. So we do see opportunity there to kind of bring in something that's even more than Siege Cup for the top of the ladder. But we don't have anything to announce today.
Okay, well, that is definitely something potentially very exciting in the future. And I am sure that people who are watching this right now, who are the champs who gain like 2 because they've played so much already, will be excited with even that small snippet. So one question that is asked a lot, and I've seen it so much on the Siege Intels, is about when players stack together. So
Yes.
when players stack, whose MMR does it actually matchmake off?
So I love this question. And the reason why I love this question is because I think that provides context for a lot of what's happening in Rank 2.0 today, and how we see improvements coming, especially in the short term. So I'll lay out exactly how matchmaking works, because I think it's important to understand how matchmaking works in order for us to even talk about how do we improve it. So we actually take the average skill of a squad today. So that means if I'm a champion at 4,500, let's just say I'm just on the edge of champion there, and I pair up with, say, someone who's copper or bronze, say at 1,500. What ends up happening in the matchmaking algorithm is we say 4,500 champ, 1,500 copper. We add them together. You get 6,000. How many people in the squad? 2 divided by 2. You end up with a matchmaking rating of 3,000. And then those 2 people go into the queue and say, I have 2 people at 3,000. So you have 1 person at 3,000. So you're somebody who's now at the top of gold, right on the edge of plat. They would end up getting match made together because they're both in 3,000. Additionally, there's another important part to understand how that works, is that there is basically an acceptance criteria that we look for. So what happens in all of our playlists is that we try to get you as close of a match as possible in terms of your skill, but then every 30 seconds we relax that a little bit. So the longer that you end up waiting in the playlist, it'll continue to relax every 30 seconds up to a maximum. And for context, like, our ranked maximum is half of what we allow for standard. So we're a lot tighter in terms of what we allow for ranked. But that's really how it works, and that's how also you understand, like, it can be abused, right? Like, you have a champion that says, I'm going to pair with 2, 3, 4 coppers. They can drive down their matchmaking rating and then end
Sure.
up in a match with, they have no right to be there. And one champion can do a lot of damage to an opposing team. And how that was dealt with in the past was by having the matchmaking rating that said you can't play with your friend if they're more than X skill away from you. So say, for example, I think it was 1,000 or 1,500, and it would say, well, one friend is really good and continued to be good, and now you guys can no longer play together, even though you were having fun every weekend and you're enjoying itself. So what we ended up doing was we broke apart friend groups in order to keep kind of like the competitive integrity. But that's why I'd love to talk about what we have coming, because we have an answer for that, which is not just kind of putting that back,
Sure.
that skill rating. We have a lot of improvements that are incoming, and some of which have not been announced, but I'll be announcing them today.
That is very exciting. So I guess that kind of goes on to the next topic. You've kind of brought up the issue of boosting already. So obviously it's really great that you can play with your friends regardless of your rank. But I think there's probably been quite a lot of frustration within the community at the fact that like people will say, I am silver and I was silver in 1.0, I'm silver in 2.0, why am I playing against a champ? And then
Yeah.
like with that champ potentially being also champ in 1.0, is there a reason why that could be, or is that because they have most likely boosted with a copper, for example?
Yeah. Well, there's multiple reasons. One is, maybe I was previously a champion and then I haven't played for a little bit, so there's been a little bit of decay in their skill. So therefore, they end up. We don't actually have skill decay, but maybe they just don't play as well as they were in the past, and then they've dropped rank, and then that's why they are in your lobby. But then, of course, there is the boosting aspect. So yes, maybe they paired with other players that whether they found on looking for a group or something like that, where they ended up boosting.
So in regards to boosting, so you kind of mentioned that there might be something in the works for this. Do you guys have a plan to try and help prevent this in the future, to stop that one champion going into a lower lobby and being able to basically ace every round because they are the superior player in that situation?
So yes, is the short answer. We have three things that are coming, and I think I'd like to get into the details of all of them. Um, so the first I'll mention is skill initialization, which sounds like it's for onboarding, it's for new players, but actually it affects global matchmaking more than you might expect. So what happens today with a player? They go into ranked for say the very first time. They get initialized in the center of the bell curve, and the skill bell curve. So what ends up happening is they end up in matches with golds, with platinums and silvers, when they have no reason to be in those lobbies. So what we're going to be doing is with skill initialization is we're going to be looking at the 50 hours before they played that ranked match, their performance within our other playlists such as standard and quick match, and using an algorithm which basically sets a new starting value for those players. And again, it ends up affecting who's on your team. So there's a lot of time where you might say, I was playing a lobby and my teammate didn't even seem to know where they were going, or I was making callouts. They were not reacting to my callouts and didn't seem to know what the operators were doing. Well, they might just be still relatively new to the game and we initiated them incorrectly. So now with the new skill initialization feature, that will actually cause those players to kind of be less likely to be in the lobbies, especially at the higher ranks. The second that I wanted to talk about is dynamic matchmaking. So dynamic matchmaking, what it actually is currently today we set all of our matchmaking values in terms of like the who we accept within your match in terms of the skill difference. We set one value for everywhere in the world. But what dynamic matchmaking does is it allows us to start doing very focused acceptance criterias for who belongs in your match based on the popularity of that region. So let's just say you're playing in North America at 8 p.m. at night. You'll end up in a very populated time, so that we can be a lot more strict in terms of who you get match made against, meaning that you're less likely to kind of just run into those of further ranks. But then, of course, the alternate could be true if you're, playing in a low populated region in the middle of the night where there's less people. That again, that dynamic matchmaking can kind of open that up and make sure that you're not waiting forever for a match. You can still play ranked, but it just might be a little bit looser with the matchmaking. But that dynamicism is something that's going to bring us a lot of control in terms of not having to say, well, of course we need to set it for this acceptance criteria because what about these other low populated regions? Now we can be a lot more specific. So both of those two that I just talked about, skill initialization and dynamic matchmaking, were technically already announced. We announced those at the reveal. What I'd like to talk about additionally today is something that we have coming over the next few seasons. Is called Phantom Player. So it's the first time we've talked about this. We've been working with our data scientist teams for a long time trying to figure out how to ultimately address the issue of, as you mentioned, boosting, or how to play with, why am I in gold and I play with a champion? So what Phantom Player does is it adds a sixth Phantom player, so not an actual player, but like a mathematical value to each team. And that's the value, how much that value will be worth, depends on multiple criteria. So one is the number of players that are within that stack, within the squad.
Okay.
So if there's like one player playing with like two friends, so you have a squad of three, it'll say, okay, there's three players in the squad, and then it will take their skill. And so, is one a champion? Is one a copper? Is one a gold? Depending on what their overall skill is, that will determine also how much gets added. So we have three players of this skill, going to add this much weight in terms of their overall stack. But then there's another value, which is what we call the delta. So you have a champion playing with a copper as an example. That would be a very large delta. Like the champion's very far away from the copper.
Sure.
So the more that there's a delta, the higher value that will also get added to the Phantom player.
Okay.
So based on the number of people within the stack, whatever ultimately their skill is, and the difference within their skill will add a value to that stack. And that means that if I'm a champion pairing with coppers, say I pair with like 3 or 4 coppers to really drive down that average, that will no longer work, because you'll end up having multiple people in your stack with a total skill and skill disparity that's quite high, which will boost the amount that will add to your squad and what the weight of that squad is. So that way you'll end up playing and getting harder lobbies.
Sure. So in that situation, the Phantom player, uh, so say it was a champ with coppers and you add in like the sick Phantom player. So if there's like a huge difference in the delta, that Phantom player would potentially be like diamond, for example. So then their enemies or the opponents would be like diamond level lobbies. So the coppers
Yeah,
couldn't cope, for example.
that's the thing, is that the champion right now is pairing with coppers to bring themselves into an easier lobby, right? So they
Sure.
can get wins and they can kind of keep stacking their wins against each other. By trying to do that with the Phantom player solution, it'll mean that they'll actually put them much higher into the community. Meaning that if you are, in a natural situation, so you have a friend that has low skill and a friend that has high skill, that low skill player is going to be playing in a higher skilled lobby.
Okay,
Whereas
sure.
today, the higher skill will get brought down into the lower skill lobby a little bit.
Okay, so that's a really exciting thing that's potentially coming soon, or is coming in the future.
Yeah.
And then I just had a question about the skill initialization that you mentioned at the beginning of the three things. So you said
Yes.
that like with the new players, obviously they don't belong in the center of the bell curve, so they don't belong in like silver or gold. So if their first 50 hours aren't very good, then they'll be put lower in like copper or bronze, for example. So will
Yeah.
that also work if somebody, for example, makes an account to essentially like boost, for example, and then they
Smurfs.
absolutely smurf accounts, and they absolutely like steamroll in standard and they get to level 50 quite quickly? Will they then be put in like diamond lobbies, or like it will place them in the higher place so they can't then destroy the lower lobbies?
It'll depend on their performance, but yeah, they won't be. They'll be now to the right of the bell curve. They'll depending on how much they perform. So yeah, they wouldn't necessarily be initialized at gold anymore. Instead, now they could be initialized at plat and potentially even diamond.
Okay, cool. That's so like all three of these things combined, it sounds really positive and great to combat smurfs and boosting. So this is very hopeful for rank 2.0. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I am personally very excited by this. So I'm looking forward to see how this plays out when it comes in.
Yeah, and thanks giving us an opportunity to talk about it, because yeah, it is a complicated subject. Matchmaking is a complicated subject, and there's a lot to it. It's not just like, hey, here's your number, this number and that number, put them together. It's a little bit more complicated to that than that. But that the conversation like this a lot gives us that outlet to kind of have a more deep conversation about it.
Sure, and I guess whilst we've been talking about the hidden MMR and the skill, what actually contributes to that? Like, is it purely based on wins? Is it based on KD, or is it based on overall points? And I guess a follow-on question from this is, if KD does affect it or points do affect it, is there ever any plans in the future to give more points for like playing objective more? Because obviously some people have like a zero point 0.8 or a zero point 0.9 KD, but it doesn't mean they're bad players, but they actually like play objective and support and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So the only thing that goes into skill right now is the win.
Okay.
There's we've looked at a number of different values such as kills and as you mentioned KD and so on, but nothing is has proven to be a predictor of success. Like just taking pure wins is the absolute best way, and there's two aspects in the skill. So there you have your actual number, your skill value, but then you also have something called the sigma, which is our confidence rating in terms of like how much we believe that our number is right. So that will determine how many points your skill fluctuates. So does it go up? Does it go down based on a win or a loss? So if we say we have a high sigma, which that means that we don't have a lot of accuracy on you, and you take a win or you take a loss, we'll adjust you by a lot because we'll say, okay, well, we gave you a match of say 2,500 and you won, so maybe we should try putting you much higher and
Okay.
then see what happens. And that's kind of like an automated process in the sense that the more we learn about you from your wins and your losses, that Sigma starts to understand, oh, maybe you belong here. And then we'll start to find your position within the community. And you'll get more or less, excuse me, you'll end up losing or winning less because we start to believe that this is roughly where you belong within the community.
Okay, so when it comes to like the adjustment of the skill, um, for example, I find that I'll use myself as an example to make it easier to ask the question, I guess. So for the last few seasons, I find that I don't really have like an MMR or ELO fall off until I hit like Diamond 5, and then it drastically then falls off. So that suggests that I am where I should be. Um, so say I went on a massive losing streak, would it reflect live in that season that I will then start gaining a lot less, or does it wait till next season and then, for example, I'd start losing more in Emerald compared to Diamond this season, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so every match will adjust both the skill and your Sigma. Every match. So say for example, there with Elo, it has like an idea about whether or not it believes you're going to win or lose. So it'll say, let's just say you're in your actual situation. Say you're at Diamond 5 and you're in a match, and it says, chances are you're probably going to win this match. That's part of Sigma. Sigma is basically almost predicting, like making a bet on you and saying, I think you're going to win. And then say, let's just say you lose. So you surprise the Sigma, meaning that it starts to say, well, maybe I'm not as confident as I thought I was. And let's say you lose again. And then that'll continue to happen and your Sigma will grow, meaning that the amount of points you could lose on each next loss will also will make you lose more. So that and what ends up happening is that yeah, even in that season, let's just say you're Diamond 5, usually you're Diamond 5, and you start going on a big losing streak, you might not make it to Diamond 5, or might be much harder for you to make it to Diamond 5 in that season because it's all in real time. It's happening all the time in every
Okay,
match.
that makes sense. So that's good to know. So now I can be more sad when I lose. Um, so I feel like we've kind of already touched on this and have spoken about it a lot, but I know it gets asked a lot. For those who may have missed like the first few minutes of the stream, a common question I get asked a lot is why do I only gain 15 but lose 30 in Silver 1, for example?
Yeah, so in that situation, your rank has now passed your skill. So you got some good wins, some lucky wins. It kind of pushed you past where your skill is, and then you had a loss. Then basically what will happen is that your rank will drop more because you're above where your skill value is. And so that's again, that's not necessarily disheartening. That can also say continue to improve, try new strategies, play different operators, and keep kind of doing what you can to win because chances are the system believes that you belong in silver at that point.
Sure. So yeah, that makes sense, and I kind of expected that to be the answer. A question that gets asked a lot as well is about solo queue players, and I know this was put in Siege Intels yesterday, but for those who might not have seen it, why can't solo queue players have their own solo queue?
So what we ended up doing was, and again, I said it in the Siege Intels, like we did think this was a good idea. So we looked into it and tried to see if we could make it work, make the math work. We do have a lot of data scientists on Ubisoft, and we do a lot of predictive models. And how this actually works is we'd say, okay, let's just say we have a solo queue and our normal queue. What if 30% of the solo players that happen in our normal ranked queue move to the solo queue? What if 50% moved over? What if 70% moved over? And that ends up returning a number of different models on like what would end up happening to the community. So say, for example, in our current rank system, what would happen if X% of the solos moved over? And the thing that scared us, and it's not off the table forever, but it is off the table for now. But what scared us a lot was what was happening to the matchmaking time of duos, specifically players that are one person and their friend that are playing ranked. Their matchmaking time went really, really high, like many multiples over where we felt comfortable. And we had to try to think of like, okay, we're going to add a solo queue, but it just means that duos are going to have to waiting a long time for a match. It's going to be hard to kind of fill them because there's less trios than there is duos, and they'd basically be looking for a trio or another duo and a solo, but a lot of the solos say are now in the solo queue. Um, we also started playing with the idea about like, well, if there's less solos, then maybe you have to get rid of quads. Like maybe a four stack can't exist anymore because we won't be able to serve those players, or we'd have to label it and say, hey, expect very long wait times if you're playing with on a four stack. But we just kind of kept looking at it and say, you know what, the time is not right. Let's keep working on improving the matchmaking. We talked about the Phantom player and the other improvements that we have coming. Let's focus on that. Let's prioritize that. Let's see if we can make better matches, and then in the future we'll relook at whether or not we want to try adding something like a solo queue.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think people would appreciate massive wait time, so that makes perfect sense. Obviously, in season 4, there will be PC and console crossplay,
Yeah.
but there will also, it was announced a little while ago that if Zim players get caught doing it 3 times, they have to play in PC lobbies for 90 days. So
Yes.
will a Zim be put on the PC like in a rank stack if there's like 4 PC players and a Zim gets put into that pool? Will those PC players then have to play with that Zim on their team?
In Year 9 Season 4, when we roll out this feature, yes, the Sim players will be treated as a PC player and match made just as a normal PC player would be.
Okay, cool. That is good to know. So I know we've had, so I think that's like the questions that I've written down that's been asked from the community. So I know it also had loads of questions come in. So I'm just gonna ask some of the questions from chat as well.
Sure.
So one of the questions from chat, and I know we have discussed this, but it's one of the ones that's been asked a lot, is why can't you show the hidden MMR rating in the game?
Yeah, so that it's just that rating is not going to tell the whole story anymore. Like say, for example, imagine you're a champion, you see 4,500, but then the squad that you end up matching with will ultimately change that rating so much that you'd still end up in a situation where you say, well, why is that person, like say we just added it today, you'd end up in the exact same situation where you would say, well, why is that champion in my lobby? So I think that's the key reason. Like we don't want to just show you a number that doesn't necessarily have as much meaning as we think it is. But I did say earlier in this call, we are looking at ways that we can kind of bring more information into the game. We will be bringing, a whole how it works section. We're going to be working on career stats, so you can, I guess, see about, how you're performing within the season versus previous seasons. But also we're exploring ways that we can kind of demonstrate that convergence, that idea of, my rank, my skill, how am I converging between those two things? Don't have a good solution for this yet, but I think just putting the number back also doesn't send the right message either.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so makes sense. I guess a question I have like kind of thought of whilst like talking about this kind of stuff is I remember like a few years ago, or maybe even a few seasons ago, there used to be some ranked rotation in between like the rank or map rotation in between the ranked playlists. Is that something that will ever come back, or will it just be a case of like all maps in ranked always?
No, I don't think it's going to be in all maps. I think we're looking right now at what's the right number of maps for ranked. I think we have 16 at the moment. So every time we add a map, like we added layer and then removed stadium, and so we're always looking at what's the right rotation. I think there's pros and cons when you start looking at do we have less maps? Do we have more maps? And that ultimately just comes down to the pros and cons. But I don't think you're going to see that we stick at 16 forever.
Okay, that's that that's good to know. uh, so chat also has asked, why can't players influence their skill properly? Only the outcome of the match currently counts, but why? Why not also accounting for KD, gadget use, strat use, etc.?
Just because it's not an actual predictor of whether or not you're going to win that match. The number one thing that we can matchmake you with is our belief of whether or not you're going to win that match. And your past history of your wins and losses is the best way to do that. We have tried a number of different solutions in terms of predictions, predictive models that we've put into a number of different data science simulations, where we start saying, well, what if we start to include kills? What if we start to include this? And at the end of the day, nothing has beaten the Phantom Player solution in terms of uh, giving higher quality matches. So that's why, again, we're going to start with that. I'm going to see where we end up, but we do believe that that's going to be a pretty impactful solution.
Okay, awesome. And then in regards to ranked 1.0, what was the actual problem with 1.0 slash what why was the decision made to go from ranked 1.0 to ranked 2.0? I know that you said at the beginning ranked 2.0 has been successful in regards to people play it more. It's gone up by a significant number as well. But yeah, why was that decision made in the first place?
There was two main things that really stuck out for us with ranked 1.0. Um, One of which that we talked about quite a bit was that players would play their 10 placements, end up in gold, and then just drop for the rest of the season, and it wasn't a very rewarding experience. I know some people really liked that experience, and maybe they tried to climb out of it, but for a very large portion of our audience, maybe less vocal, but we could see it. Those players were not really having a great time within the ranked playlist. Additionally, is that people did think it was a bit of a progression system. Like they saw the number, they saw the different ranks, and they saw, okay, let me just kind of progress and see how far I can get within this system. But it wasn't really how the system was working. The system was trying to guess your rank as fast as possible, and then try to position you within the community and kind of say this is where you belong. Whereas now what we see with Rank 2.0 is that it is more, it matches players' expectations a little bit more in terms of it's a progression system where you have a place where you belong within the community and you try to uphold that every single season. And by starting at the bottom and working your way up, you get the rewards on your way there. And it is a better feeling rather than just say dropping from gold to bronze. And again, we see that through the performance metrics that we have in the game. As I mentioned, 45% of players in the ranked playlist now versus 35% during ranked 1.0, and players just playing way more throughout a season than they used to. And there's a lot of benefits. One of the benefits is that we have way more players to matchmake you with. If people were just leaving the playlist after 10 placements, then we have less people in the matchmaking queues that we can play give you a match with, which means less wait times and more opportunity for us to try to improve the matchmaking. Um, and additionally, there are benefits to other playlists as well. We see people playing ranked, and then they play quick match, and then they play standard, and then they play, arcade game modes. They tend to be, that those players playing more in ranked bleeds into other playlists, and has benefits to other playlists as well.
Sure. And I guess like very grateful that there aren't restrictions, so I can play with my friends. Especially because some of them go seasons without playing. So in regards to like ranked 1.0, obviously it used to have the soft reset every season, and if you didn't play for like, so say you were, I don't know, even champ, and then after like not playing for 4 or 5 seasons, you may come back to the game and then you're gold, as it's like
Yeah,
reset enough. What happens with rank 2.0 if you don't play for like a year?
yeah. Currently, your skills remain static. So that's one of the things we haven't talked about. But one opportunity that we see is skill decay. It wouldn't be the same as the soft reset. The soft reset was like you literally mixed 2 seasons and you went from champion to gold. Like I think that's a little bit extreme. Um, but I think skill decay depends on your overall skill. Like I could see coppers decaying differently than champions, for example. So that's an opportunity that we see.
Okay. Um, one question chat has is, isn't allowing a squad without elo restrictions more detrimental if the squad is not a full stack? For instance, Diamond could bring 3 friends who just joined the game, and resulting the game being a harsh experience for the remaining player.
For you said remaining player. Do you mean like the diamond?
So I think what they mean is like if you have somebody stacked with, say I stacked with 3 people who've never played before, and my ranked 2.0 is champ, and they're all like copper. The other person, like the solo queue player on our team, will it be a harsh experience for them?
That solo queue player would be still the rating of the squad. So say for example it's a diamond player with 3 coppers. So let's just say phantom player adds I'm making this up, like 500 more elo to their team. Don't quote me on the 500. I'm just using it as an example. It would push up that squad and the ultimately the matchmaking rating of that squad, but then the solo queue player would still be matched based on their current rating. So that solo queue player should be able to handle that squad that difficulty, that matchmaking criteria.
Sure, so they'll be like the phantom player level. So in theory, there'd be
Right.
like
Exactly.
2 diamonds against what I assume would be the equivalent of 2 diamonds and 3 coppers on the enemy team, but it wouldn't just be like a low level team.
No, 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 it wouldn't.
Okay, yeah.
Phantom player addresses the differences that happen in the MMR rating when players squad up. That's the focus of phantom players. So solo queue players would remain untouched.
Okay, that's good to know. Sorry, I'm just going through all the questions that are coming through from chat. So I guess we've kind of touched on this point. But one question that's been asked a lot is, why are we getting less elo from winning at a certain point? Doesn't it prevent you from leveling up? And how do you raise your hidden skill level?
Yeah, so I think that ultimately is winning matches that we expect you to lose. That will be the honest answer. Is that so? If your skill is changing every single match, like even if you only win a little bit because we expected you to win, it's still changing. But let's just say you end up in a match where we think, oh, you're probably going to lose this match just because that's the way that the criteria worked. And then you win that match. That would be a great way to get a lot of hidden skill.
Okay. Um, that makes sense. So in regards to the rank and skill being separate things, um, is there an aim to try and get the rank point? So the rank and the skill to kind of reflect each other in the future. As I know that some people feel that if you play enough games, even if you're not great at the games, you could still hit champ. I mean, I know people who are genuinely like hard stuck in bronze, like they genuinely can't get out of bronze because their fall off is as soon as they hit like copper 1, their fall off is then bronze, so they struggle to get out of that point. But some people do say, and I've seen it in the comments, that they say that anybody can get to champ.
No,
Um,
that's really not true. It's really, really, really not true. Like you even mentioned, the player that's getting plus 15 minus 30, right? Like those are in silver, I mean, like those are the players that are getting hard stuck, and that's matching your rank and your skill and kind of saying, hey, this is where we think you belong, prove us otherwise. But if you just keep winning matches and say you're that silver, like no, you won't get to champion. What is happening, which we've owned up to today, is like there is some boosting happening in the rank 2.0, and like that is true that there is boosting happening. But no, no, not everybody can get to champion if you play enough. You'll get hard stuck, as you mentioned.
sure. Okay. So yeah, that's also good to know. As I feel like, from my perspective as well, knowing that only 0.8% of players are in champ, I think does prove that obviously not everybody gets to champ. Like, fair enough, it's increased over rank 2.0 to rank 1.0, but still less than 1% of players are champ. So
Yeah, and I think like on our first seasons when we launched, and the balancing wasn't as tight as it probably should have been. But again, we tried our best to balance it ahead of time. And there's still people that believe that many people can get into champ, and it's just not the case. If you look at the from season to season to season, especially you look at year 7, season 4, year 8, season 1, those 2 seasons, there was a lot of champions compared to what we have today. But we've gotten it more under control, and it's pretty consistent over the last 3 seasons.
yeah, and I do feel, I mean, I do feel for me, I prefer ranked 2.0 in a lot of senses, especially when it comes to like the issue of cheating on both PC and console. There was nothing more demotivating than getting into a game against 5 cheaters and then having to lose like a whole rank basically because I faced cheaters. Whereas now I know it's still super frustrating. Um, but at least I'm like, oh well, I'm only gonna lose 9. Go again, kind of thing.
Yeah, and we have the demotion shield as well. It means sometimes you just got that rank, and then in ranked 1.0 you lose it immediately on the next match potentially. Whereas now we kind of give you a little bit of protection, get one match protection, and say, okay, well, try again, see if you can keep holding on to this. So it is a little bit, um, that those demotion shields just like account for a little bit of quality of life in terms of the way that you experience the season.
Sure. So sorry, I've got so many questions coming in from chat right now. So one question that we have is, if not like an individual MMR, will there be any plan to show the squad average MMR at one point of matchmaking? So I guess when you load into the game, it says the average MMR of this game is this.
We're actually introducing something in the Siege Cup, and you'll see it when we launch it. We're starting to have different tiers of squads, and that's the tournaments that you'll end up in. So you'll start to know like what is my squad's rating, like my RT rating. It's not as simple as like 2,539, for example, but instead it will kind of say, hey, you're a B squad, or you're a C squad, or you're an A squad. And then that'll ultimately determine the tournaments that you'll be able to enter. So we like that just because it does kind of give you kind of an idea about where you stand within the community as a group, as a squad. And I think it's something that was required for Siege Cup.
Okay, and since we brought up Siege Cup, this is perfect to ask this question. Someone has said that what is the point of having friends being able to play ranked together when the Community Cup is being introduced? That is a competitive environment where friends can play together. Surely otherwise they could just play standards.
Yeah, Siege Cup is it's not going to be on all the time. It will be a time limited tournament that runs um, likely bi-weekly when we launch, but eventually weekly. And we just want to, allow players to compete within the Siege Cup. But it's not like if you want to hop on, I'm using this as an example, like on a Tuesday night and play some ranked with your friends, it's still going to be the go-to place for your competitive Siege.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense because yeah, my understanding is that Siege Cup isn't on all of the time, so that makes complete sense. I'm very excited for Siege Cup.
Yeah, we are.
um, let's just see. Have I asked all of these questions? Come through that one. So will so you know how in ranked 1.0 you can see players' ranks at the end of the game? Is that something that can come back in the future, or will it ever come back in the future?
I think yeah, we'll probably be looking at what we can do with that. Especially as the playlist is understood a little bit better, and also when we feel that our matchmaking is has improved. As we mentioned, we have multiple fixes coming over the next couple seasons. So at some point, I think we could look into doing that.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know because then I guess when that does then finish and I don't know, you feel like it was like a tough loss, or you could see that actually it was like an average game, or if you feel like you got destroyed, then you'd be like, okay, fair enough, it makes sense. So we have
Right.
one more question. So the last question we have is, you mentioned the Phantom Players Edition. Can you sum up all the changes we should expect for Rank 2.0? Any changes planned in game to better explain the system, for example, or provide us with more information?
Yeah. So I think there's two different things. There's the matchmaking fixes, and then there's the overall system. So in terms of the overall system, we are bringing a how it works section within the game where we're going to be a lot more clear, and in terms of how does hidden MMR work, how does your rank work, what's the relationship between those different things. We're going to be bringing in career stats, and we're going to be looking at other future ways that we can kind of improve the relationship between rank and skill. Additionally, in terms of matchmaking, we have three major additions coming over the next few seasons. One is skill initialization. So that's taking when the player enters into the ranked playlist, the last 50 hours of their gameplay within a standard and quick match, and initialize them in a different place in the community rather than a standard static position that we do today. Dynamic matchmaking allows us to be a lot more tight in terms of our what we call acceptance criteria. So who we let within a match, how far away is their head MMR, and that will be different. That will be dynamic based on how popular a region or a server is. So again, going like North America at a peak time, we can be a lot tighter in terms of those matches and try to give better matches. Whereas in the middle of the night in a low populated region, it will be much more relaxed. And then Phantom Player, what Phantom Player does is it adds a sixth player mathematical value, and it says who's in a squad. So if it say it's a squad of three, there's three players within the squad, what's their MMR, and what's the delta of the MMR. So what's the difference in MMR within that squad? And then it takes all those variables and then provides a new value that gets added to their matchmaking rating. And so that'll basically bring the champions away from the copper lobbies.
Okay, awesome. So these are like super exciting things coming in the future, and I am very excited for them. I have a lot of hope for Rank 2.0, but I know that this conversation isn't fully over. This is all the time we have for questions in this, but I'm aware that there is a second session coming.
Yeah, so we're having what we call a fireside chat with a number of different content creators. We're gonna once again be able to get into the weeds a little bit with content creators asking their questions. We offered a lot of information today as well with the Siege Intel. So excited to hear what questions come out of our content creators and what they would like to ask us and how we can help provide a little bit more clarity on Rank 2.0 and what the future is.
Awesome. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for sharing this. And for those who may not have caught the beginning of the stream or who have just tuned in, I will share this full Q&A on YouTube tomorrow, and I'll get that shared around. I'll also break it up into short form on TikTok as well for those who want to just see the highlights, who don't want to watch the whole thing. But yeah, Christopher, thank you so much for sharing this new stuff with us and also clarifying Ranked 2.0, as I know that there's been so many questions about it since it has released.
Yeah, thank you, Rolo. I really appreciate the opportunity and thanks for being our host.
No, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. So with that, I will bid you all farewell, and I hope you all have a great evening or day.